Hi guys, it's Troy at the Full Setup back with another benchmark review, and today I've got another benchmark of the RTX 2060 with the Ryzen 2600 for you. Now in the previous two videos we've benchmarked the 2060's outstanding 1080p and 1440p performance, but for today's video we will be seeing if the 2060 has what it takes to be an entry-level 4K graphics card. Now I think we all know that the 2060 is not a 4K ultra graphics card. We're not going to be playing AAA titles at ultra settings. So I'm going to be lowering settings today. So what I've planned to do is open world games. Games that you want to look very nice, very beautiful looking games. I'm going to play at slightly higher texture settings and have lower FPS than I'd normally like to play at because I want the game to look good. Now as for first person shooters, we want the maximum FPS we can. So we're going to have everything set to low for those. And I'm going to turn off AA where necessary as well. Now I'm going to be testing 12 games for you today at a mix of stock and overclock results for you today. There's also going to be some DLSS versus DLSS off and a little bit of ray tracing thrown in as well. Over to the 2060 then, I'm using the Palit Gamingpro Oc with 6GB of GDDR6. Now this RTX 2060, it's using a bin GPU, so as you can see here it's actually boosting way above its 1830MHz max boost rating, and for the most it's running between 1935 and 2000 MHz depending on how cool you're keeping the card and how long you've been running it for. Now as for the test system, I'm using my Ryzen 2600 rig, got 16 gigs of 3200 MHz DDR4. I'm using Samsung B dies with some pretty tight timings. Now you probably don't need to use that for this rig, but I just want to use the same timings as previous videos. I've also got an ASUS X370 CROSSHAIR motherboard as well. I'm using a 600 watt power supply, but you should be fine with a 450 to 500 watt unit. Moving on to stock versus overclock performance. Now as I've already mentioned, this card is boosting rather high. So I was only able to add 110 MHz to the core. As for the memory, now in some of the footage, you're going to see the 900 MHz boost to the memory that I was using in my 1080p and 1440p, but for a lot of it, you're going to see 800 MHz. And that's because only at 4K, I've been getting some crashes at 900 MHz. Now, I've done some tests at 900 versus 800. It was literally margin of error difference in FPS. So that's why I haven't done the whole test at 800 MHz. As for the Ryzen 2600 though, we are going to keep it at stock settings because, at 4K, the GPU is always going to be the bottleneck in this system. So stock running at 3.8 GHz turbo is more than enough for this setup. Now for Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I'm running at medium settings and I have turned AA off for this benchmark. With both the Ryzen 2600 and RTX 2060 at stock settings, we have a minimum of 45 and an average of 54 frames per second. Overclocking the RTX 2060 scores a minimum of 48 and an average of 58 frames per second. Moving on to Far Cry 5, and again we are running this at medium settings with no AA enabled. For all stock we have a minimum of 42 and an average of 48 frames per second. Overclocking the GPU scores a minimum of 44 and an average of 53 frames per second. Shadow of War again at medium settings but with FXAA turned on at all stock scores a minimum of 49 and an average of 68 frames per second. Overclocking the RTX 2060 scores a minimum of 54 and an average of 75 frames per second. So there were the stock versus overclock scores, which were taken when I was not recording. Now as for the rest of the video, we're going to focus mostly on gameplay, but I will be leaving the graphics card overclocked. Now I know a lot of you always want to see stock and always complain that my graphics card is overclocked, but we're recording with shadow play, so we're losing 5 FPS. So what you're seeing actually on screen is pretty close to stock because we know overclocking is only getting about 5 FPS as well. So what you're seeing here is pretty much stock footage. Although previous Forza Motorsport games can run way over 60 FPS at 4K without problems on an RTX 2060, when it comes to the Horizon series like 2018's Horizon 4, it's kind of a much more demanding game. But I'm still able to run the game at high settings with 2x AA, and it's got no trouble running it, average frame rates always being in the mid 70s as well. Now as for PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, I'm actually running at the settings that I mostly play with. I'd say they're kind of competitive. I don't know if they're everybody else's competitive settings, but this is what I like to play with. So I've got everything set to low settings, but then I have the view distance set to ultra so I can see quite far and everything that's around me basically. And even at these settings, I think this game looks really good at 4K. It looks very good indeed, and the frame rates are also quite good as well, mostly staying again within the mid 70s, so very good frame rates indeed. Now the rest of the games are going to put the 2060 under some serious stress. We are going to stress the hell out of the GPU for the next few games. And there's no more of a stressful game out at the moment than Assassin's Creed Odyssey. and medium settings with no AA and both shadows and volumetric clouds set to low. Even with all these settings turned down, the game is still stuck at the mid 40s. Now, this is a game that I've always been happy to play at 45 FPS as long as it looks good, but I know that's not going to be for everyone, and this might be something that you don't enjoy, but I still found the game to be very playable at these frame rates. Moving on to Black Ops 4, and to be fair, I'm quite surprised about the performance of Black Ops 4. I expected Black Ops 4 to run better. At 1080p, ultra settings, this game was running way over 100 FPS. At 1440p, you know, very high ultra settings, it was running around 100 FPS. So I was thinking maybe I could run it at medium, maybe, with AA disabled, and I'd be sort of sitting around between 60 and 80. Well, I wasn't able to. I'm running this at low settings, and again, I thought even at low settings, I'd be getting close to that 100 FPS. But as you can see, it is much closer to 60, and I was getting times where it was dipping under 60 as well. Now, these are still playable frame rates. I was just expecting better performance. So I do have a little bit of Anthem footage for you, and I must be honest, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was struggling to fly. I had quite a lot of other stuff going on, so I didn't really get to enjoy the demo that much, and that's definitely the word that we need to use as well. It was a demo. I know we're very close to launch, but this is still a demo, so hopefully we might see some performance gains, but this looks like a very demanding game anyway. Although there's many parts, even at low settings, where it's sort of above 60 FPS, you are going to find in intense gunplay areas that you're going to get dips down to the mid 40s, and I probably wouldn't want to play this game at that frame rate. So it's time to test a little bit of DLSS and ray tracing performance. Like I said, once we have more games to test, I will make a dedicated video, but I'm just going to let this bit of the video run, and then I will come back with my final thoughts.
See you around.
Objective Charlie. We must take the enemy's objectives if we want to stay in this fight.
So there was the DLSS and ray tracing segment, and as mentioned in previous videos, when we have more titles available, I will make a dedicated video for you. Let's start with DLSS then. Although there were some gains in Final Fantasy, I do think that DLSS will be a feature that offers a lot less performance gains on a 2060 than its bigger RTX brothers. And although I'm not fully sold on the feature yet, I really do agree with a lot of what Hardware Unboxed has covered on the subject, and if you haven't seen that video, I'd go and check it out. And I am really interested to see what sort of performance boost it will add at 1440p on Battlefield 5 and Anthem, but to be honest, I can't remember the last time I would turn TAA on those games anyway when I'm going to play. So I don't know if for me, if it will have any performance boost, but you might like it. I'm just saying at the moment, I don't like it. Now, as for ray tracing, we knew Battlefield 5 on its own, you're seeing some footage of it here at DirectX 11, is demanding enough at 4K. So for me to turn DXR on was, you know, and to say it's crap graphics card, you can't really say it. You know this graphics card isn't supposed to be doing ray tracing at 4K. But it does look very nice, you know, it did look very nice walking around even if it was at 30 frames per second. So would I recommend the RTX 2060 for a 4K gaming rig? No, I can't. You can't recommend it really, can you? You know, this card is much more suited to 1080p and 1440p high refresh rates, you know, on like a FreeSync monitor, because they support FreeSync now. You are going to much more enjoy your experience on that. You're going to have a much better gaming experience than having this holy grail 4K picture quality. I am telling you, much better experience. But that's not to say that you can't have an enjoyable 4K gaming experience on it. Prime example is about 6 foot away from this PC. I have a 4K HDR TV and I really enjoy playing Tomb Raider on it. And when I've got the controller plugged in and I'm just playing it with some friends, or me and the missus are sat playing it, you know, it's quite nice. I don't notice the input lag from using a mouse because I'm not using a mouse and keyboard. It's just a generally quite a good enjoyable experience. Having HDR on as well, also very enjoyable experience. So yeah, open world games I'm happy to play, but shooters, I don't want to play them at 4K anytime soon. For me, when I'm just playing games, not when I'm benchmarking for the channel, I just play all low. I want the lowest latency that I can. I have every setting turned down to low that I can when I'm playing games like Battlefield. That's the settings that I use. And although the frame rates were still more than playable at 4K at low, compared to the frame rates I'm getting at 1080p and 1440p, it's just not an enjoyable experience for me. It's not something that I would enjoy playing. But you're not me, I'm not you, so we've all got our own opinions on it. So I'd be really interested on your thoughts. You know, are you thinking about getting an RTX 2060 for 4K gaming? Maybe doing what I'm doing, using it for high refresh rate, but occasionally playing on a 4K TV. Let me know in the comment section below. That's it from me today. If you like the video, leave a like. If you dislike the video, leave a dislike. And I'll be back again very soon.